opinions expressed by callers, guests, and hosts do not necessarily reflect those of the Black Talk Radio Network and Black Talk Media Project. Black Talk Radio is new black media for the new millennium.
This is the Codebreakers. Today is April the 25th, 2017. This is Paradox. I also have DC on the line, and I think T is on the line as well today. We can always be reached at blacktalkradionetwork.com, Codebreakers. The toll-free number to call in is 1-866-510-90... what is the number here? 9025. I'm sorry, 1-866-510-9025. You can always catch us on Twitter at Codebreakers 191. Facebook, you can just find us on Code Space Breakers. Instagram, Code_Breakers 1865. I think we're mostly probably active on Twitter, probably more than anything, I believe. Fellas, are you there?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And thanks for the quick intro. But yeah, just to the listeners out there, please hit us up. Like, if you hear us talking crazy, or you have any questions or concerns, we'd be more than happy to, converse and get with you guys and let you see if there's like any kind of dialogue that we can get started. It seems like everybody kind of scared. I know that we kind of have some broad ideas out there, but we all for the betterment of those that are classified as black. So hopefully, we can get some dialogue, man. We just like y'all.
We might just be in the echo chamber, but everybody just might agree.
Well, hopefully, I know that ain't true because we don't agree on the line. So,
that's true.
That is not the truth. So hopefully. We are trying to solve the problem of racism, white supremacy, the biggest problem on the planet. So hopefully, please, get in contact with us. Reach out to us. We're just like you guys, and we're still learning.
I did want to throw a shout out. Is T on the line? Do you have any quick thoughts, real quick? I wasn't sure if he was going to be talking on this call or speaking. Or was he just listening in? So maybe he's just listening in.
He probably is.
But I did want to throw a shout out to Black Talk Radio Network, Mr. Scotty Reed. I was listening to a sister speak on a couple of, just online or whatever. Very well spoken woman, and she was talking about. I want to say she mentioned that there wasn't any independent black media out there, so I did want to throw a shout out to Black Talk Radio as a black media setup for us. I was surprised that she had said that she is kind of in the mix. So just kind of caught me off guard. I said, well, hold up, don't we know somebody? That, when I hit her online, I said, don't we know someone who has don't we have a Black Talk radio network? So I just thought that was interesting.
That's definitely interesting. Hey, Paradox, I think we have our esteemed guest on the line right now. So if you want to kind of go ahead and get him on and get him in,
guys, if I may, I appreciate that, Paradox, but Codebreakers is independent media. Each and every individual program that you find on Black Talk Radio Network's platform is independent media. You know, you guys are independent. Your thoughts are your own. You put the program together. Nobody's putting it together for you. So count yourself among the independent black media.
Oh no, definitely appreciate that. I just know that you really put the effort in to really, you know, set up a system, you know, to
platform
to benefit the other platform to benefit black people.
We appreciate you. We appreciate you, Mr. Reed, for all you do for us. We really do.
So it looks like we do have Dr. Tommy Curry on. I believe this is him. I'm muted. If Dr. Curry, if you press I think it's star, I think it'll open your line up. Just want to make sure that's you. Hello, sir.
Hello. Yes, sir.
How you doing today? How you doing?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty okay. This is Paradox. I also have DC on the line, my co-host.
Okay.
Greetings, Dr. Curry. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing well, sir. How are you doing this evening?
We're doing well. Hopefully to get into some dialogue here today with you, and you know, don't hold back on account of us. Let it fly with all gander and furious anger if need be. You are you are with people that find you helpful in so many ways. So
thank you.
We really appreciate all the work you have done and everything that you have put out there to the ether. So go ahead, Paradox. Yes, sir.
Well, I just do a quick intro. Hello, everyone. We do have Dr. Tommy Curry on the line. He is joining the Codebreakers tonight. He is an associate professor. And Dr. Curry, correct me if I'm wrong. You are an associate professor in the Department of Philosophy.
Full.
So you just made full professor in the Department of Philosophy at University of Texas A&M.
Thank you.
Yeah, congrats on that. I believe your research interests include philosophy, jurisprudence, Africana Studies, and gender studies. And
yes,
I believe your primary focus is around critical race theory and Africana philosophy.
Yes, sir.
I also found I think that you was a champion debater in high school. Is that correct?
Actually, in college, yeah. I was
in college? Okay.
First black person to win a national championship in cross-examination policy debate.
Okay, and I know you also have your book is still coming out in July 2017?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. And the way you can, I was trying to get some understanding. I know you said it's coming through Temple University?
Yeah, it's being posted on Temple University July 1st.
Okay, July 1st. Okay. We can also find you at DRTJC on Twitter?
Yes, sir.
And I believe all your publications, if this is for everyone, can go online. I think it's tamu.academia.edu/Tommy Curry, and you can find all your publications there.
Yep.
And I think, is that everything? You're the executive director of philosophy, Born of the Struggle?
Yep, Philosophy Born of Struggle. Yeah, it's a Black Philosophy Conference organization, so I'm still president of that.
And could you just tell us a little bit about, I believe, the Ray A. Rothrock Fellow from 2013 to 2016?
Yeah, it was a fellowship, an endowed chair for my research. When you go up for tenure, you're put into this slot. So I was given that chair by Texas A&M. Okay.
And I also found that did you also attend UMKC? Is that Missouri, Kansas City?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. When I graduated in 1997. So I went to University of Missouri, Kansas City. They had one of the top seeded debate teams in the country at the time. Then I transferred to Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. I did my master's at DePaul and then came back to Carbondale to finish up.
Okay.
Just Paradox, pause real quick. When were you actually at Southern Illinois?
From 1999 to 2001. Then I came back in 2005 and finished up in 2006, 2007.
The Salukis. I had a friend of mine that went to school. She went to med prep program out there in Southern Illinois. That's the alma mater of Dick Gregory too. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, he came and spoke during the time that she was there. So go ahead, proceed.
He's a solid brother.
Yes, sir.
So one thing we're going to discuss, and Doctor, just hold on for me for 1 second. I'm going to go through a couple of things for the program. We do want to talk to Dr. Curry about the genesis of the black male. And the reason why I made that statement is because I think you had mentioned, I think you was in a discussion and you had mentioned the genesis of the black male, or, you know, if you want to start it doing slavery, what does that mean and kind of the effects of that? The other thing we're going to be discussing, I think in the second hour of the program, we're all going to be discussing using Black people's oppression to profit and benefit, and something me and DC will probably be going back and forth on going into the second hour. Of course, Dr. Kerr is always welcome to stay on with us, obviously. I know I'm sure you're busy.
Yeah, I got an hour.
Okay, cool. We'll try to hold you, if we can, until close to 10 o'clock.
Okay.
So that's where we are. In DC, you can jump in whenever you want, but I mean, for the audience to basically know that, you know, I think DC is where we both heard Dr. Tommy Curry speak. I believe the first time probably on the cows. You think DC?
Okay.
Well, maybe a few years ago. We've called in, asked you a few questions, but really was I would say I was personally stunned just the amount of information that you have. And when we put this program together probably a year ago, well, we've been doing this for probably a few years, but on Black Talk Radio probably the last 7 or 8 months. Outside of Gus and Dr. Wells and obviously Mr. Fuller, you definitely sort of kind of reshaped a lot of things. I think I didn't even realize honestly that this much information about specifically around Black philosophy was even out there. Or that that you had these environments where people were discussing. I know you had mentioned. I think you had wrote about something, and you had said that you studied all these Black philosophers, and you was able to write either a dissertation or something you was going to write. You end up putting together, and you only did it from Black philosophy, historically speaking.
Yeah, that was my dissertation back in oh God, how long was that? Back in 2008, 2009. Yeah. And, you know, it's you know, the funny story about that is that it's, you know, a lot of, even today, people are told that they can't write dissertations just on Black people.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Right? Because when you look at the dissertations coming out, Black philosophers usually write on white philosophers studying Black people. I just fundamentally disagree with that perspective. I think Black people can study themselves. They don't need white theories to dictate how they come about understanding their own problems in the world.
Okay. Yeah, I noticed that a lot of times when I just listen to a lot of different things you've discussed, and also some of your lectures in class, and I noticed that as you're challenging whiteness, or you and you can speak on this. Obviously, you're the one who's making the statements, but that Black people should always try to, I guess, reflect or look at oneself, no matter what level you are, what you're doing in life, and then whatever that is, write about it, discuss it, and kind of from that position versus always, I don't know if it's coming through whiteness versus looking at, you know, just looking at yourself and living your, you know, whatever is happening in your life, maybe real time and even historically, always kind of coming from that or creating something from that.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I don't think that Black people, and I'm going to argue about this in the academy all the time, I don't think Black people should look at themselves through the eyes of their oppressors. I just fundamentally disagree with that positionality. So if you take something like psychoanalysis, or you take something like phenomenology, which are, you know, aspects of how we study experience in the university, ask yourself, why do you have to start with the ideas that unconscious formations begins with savagery? Begins with, you know, like if you look at Freud, right? Totem and Taboo begins with stories of savage people in Africa and the Caribbean and South Asia wanting to rape their daughters, right? Why start with that? You see what I'm saying? So, you know, we can get a lot of places by having our own theories and thinking without having to appeal to European sentiments about our own positionality.
So you find that from your position, you're saying that that's really not what's happening, though. Most Black people are still
of course
coming
that's not
from
what's happening.
Right. Well, yeah, obviously.
But that's what I'm saying. The mythologies that white people formed about African people or about Malay or about different races of people that are not white come from this kind of paranoia and exotification. So they built their theories as if they're retreating from that, right? Freud's view was like, listen, we've evolved beyond incest, so there's no reason that we need to have laws of avoidance, right? We don't have to keep fathers away from daughters and sons away from mothers because we've evolved. You know, why do you want to create a theory where the thing that you think is deposited in your id is the savagery of black folk, right? Like, it makes no sense. You know, so I think that, you know, people have to move beyond just imitating the rhetoric, and this is why I just hate Black Twitter. You know, people imitate the rhetoric of what people say about them and then put blackface on it without understanding the actual theories that black scholars have written. You know, I don't have much patience for that.
And I also noticed that you tend to focus on something I had wrote down. I basically took a lot of your phrases and your statements and just tried to you know, just get a better understanding as I try to listen to when you're speaking or whatever.
Sure.
Just to try to get understanding. But it's interesting. You had made, I think it's really a consistent statement that looking at social media and just how, or even blogs, I guess, as well, I guess that would be considered somewhat social media, just that people are writing, but they're not researching. And you're having,
right.
It's a serious conflict where people are able to write whatever they want to write. You know, no background, no research done. They don't cite anything. They're able to write, you know, specifically, obviously, white women, white males, etc. But they're able to kind of write whatever they want to write about Black people. But there's nothing there. But then it's somehow, it's accepted. It becomes a truth almost.
Oh, absolutely.
People, yeah,
absolutely. I mean, you know, one of the things that I've talked about is how I was, you know, trying to get a piece published. Wrote about the oppression of Black men, and they sent me a blog to try to refute an academic work. And I looked, you know, so I you know, me, I went through the data set, broke it down, right? I was like, here's why you're wrong. You know, it's you know, I mean, look, people are making academic careers out of speaking to very narrow populations and crowds. Right. And when you're talking about people on social media, the people that are getting, you know, thousands and thousands of likes, the reason they're doing that is because they're being extravagant. They're saying the most provocative things based on a fixed ideology. So if you say that you're intersectional and you do intersectionality, you know, and you want to condemn Black men because Black men are hegemonic or toxic, you know, you just pick the poison and you're going to get like. But if you're an actual scholar that comes in and says, look, you're misconceptualizing the problem, that you don't understand the role of bidirectionality in our communities, you don't understand the role that economic poverty and low socioeconomic status and marginalization have on the stressors that actually cause or motivate intimate partner violence and homicide. That's not a popular conversation because nobody wants to think about what's the actual facts of the matter. Nobody actually wants to sit back and read 20, 30, 40 articles to try to get a grasp on what causes these problems. They want hashtag. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's a vastly different type of scholarship.
Yeah. I mean, I think it explains a lot as far as our behavior and how we interact within the environment. So I think it definitely explains a lot.
Absolutely. I mean, you know, if you've seen any of my debates on Twitter, I mean, I think you can see very clearly that I have a different mastery of the literature and the data sets than the people that are just constantly, you know, yelling about stuff.
Well, it seems like it's I don't want to, you know. I don't want to say pump you up. Obviously, you're extremely intelligent and you put the time in, but it does almost seem unfair at this point from what I've seen so far. So have you had, so before I ask you the question, since you mentioned that, have you had any, you know, when you've had debates, you know, through your life, and have you came into contact maybe later in your life, even though you obviously still young, to where you were challenged to the point where you had to sort of kind of question things, or have you found that, you know, kind of what you're studying and how you're studying it almost doesn't exist? So
yeah,
you're almost not being
probably
challenged
the latter.
because yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean, the idea is that I haven't met it. I mean, because, you know, I debated for 12, 13 years. So we're talking about actually winning arguments. There's not very many people that just off top, because most of these people either still debate in college or they've gone on and done other things. They're not necessarily academics. But there's not very many individuals that, you know, can tit for tat in an actual debate kind of beat me on that argument. But I have run across people that I found have perspectives and research that have made me reconceptualize things. So, like, you know, Jim Sidanaeus' work, or Jim Sedanius' work out at Harvard on social dominance theory, that really changed my perspective on how we're looking at the situation of black men. But most of the kinds of things that changed my perspective are me reading the books of people that I didn't know about, more so than just conversations. I don't find, especially philosophers, I don't find philosophers don't research. Philosophers are notorious for not really reading, right? That's not how the field developed. So it's not, for them, most of everything is intuition. It's, trying to come up with a kind of performative argument. Like people give papers and, I'm sorry?
No, I was just saying original thought. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah. No, I didn't hear. Yeah, but so it's like, people don't read books and they write whole papers about things that are already false. It's funny, I mentioned my wife today. I said, look, why they want to build an elaborate argument for something that I can literally go to an archive, find, and then disprove. Right? So why make the argument if the question is just an issue of researching and finding out the actual fact of the matter? I don't find that to be useful, expenditure of intelligence. But, some fields are different.
So if it's okay,
I'd much rather do research.
If it's okay, we're going to bounce around a little bit. If that's okay with you.
Sure.
So the book that you have coming out in July, I believe is it going to be around black male rape? Black boy rape, as far as, go ahead.
It's going to be around a lot of things. So the Man Not is a text that is trying to explain the history and conceptualizations of black males in America. And it differs from other books because, when you look at Robert Staples' book on black masculinity, or you look at what I think is one of the best books out on black men, which is Anthony LaMelle's work on black gender politics and black masculinity, I think what you find is that they're trying to answer back an argument, right? They're trying to show that black men are not patriarchal. They're trying to show that black men suffer, from dual depression, right? They're taking on very specific people. And while their books are very good in doing that, what it doesn't offer us is an at-large conceptualization of how we understand black men throughout history. So my book tries to articulate the concept of the man not, the idea that black men were never men under Western patriarchy and colonialism, and they suffer from what I call anti-black misandry, that there is a visceral hate and anti-black stereotypes that are associated with the very idea of black maleness. So what I start off with is, as you were just mentioning, a history of rape or the history of sexual violence against black males. So when we look at slavery, when we look at feminist rhetoric, when we look at colonial practices or mass rapes in Brazil, we see that black men and boys were definitely raped and sexually assaulted, sodomized throughout the history of colonization and slavery. What does that mean for how we imagine black men? Traditionally, we think of the concept of rape as belonging specifically to female bodies. When we talk about analyses or cases of rape during slavery, we're generally talking about or imagining white men raping black women. And while that did happen, and while black women have been completely debased and dehumanized based on those sexual practices, it wasn't exclusive to them. So while you have people like Angela Davis, for instance, that make claims that, black men were beaten and flogged and whipped, black women were beaten, flogged, whipped, and raped. That's just no longer the case. The research that we have, the excellent work of people like Thomas Foster, have shown that black men definitely endured this as a part and practice of slavery. Once we conceptualize that, then how does that change our frame? We traditionally think of black men and boys as being victims of racism, being shot and killed in the streets, incarcerated, not getting jobs, working themselves to death, right? We think about that. But what does it mean when we talk about the sexual violence that black men experienced during Jim Crow, where people like Willie McGee were being raped by William Metta Hawkins, that a black man that was trying to find work ends up being raped by the white woman who works in the house, right? How do we retell history given that kind of violence and abuse? So the second chapter of the book is talking actually about Eldridge Cleaver and his perspectives about white women as being part of the pinnacle, the center, the foundation of the violence of white supremacy. Then I actually move into very real questions about how we deal with these questions in our own community. What does it mean to talk about black men as victims of intimate partner violence and intimate partner homicide? What does it mean when we start talking about the early sexual experience of young black boys who are being, statutorily raped at the ages of 7, 9, 6, right? These things happen in our community, and it doesn't just happen by older black women raping young black boys. It also happens by older men raping young black boys. So there's violences in our community that we're not actually speaking or studying, but at the end, if black boys end up traumatized and end up acting out because of that trauma, we don't really have a way to talk about them outside as victims. We just talk about them as criminals. So my book is an attempt to really humanize black men and boys, to show that the kinds of violence and the histories of trauma that they've dealt with don't make them lesser people. It doesn't justify the theories that largely are coming out of feminist ideas, which suggest that they're just hyper-masculine. They're victims of their environment. I just don't believe that black men are ontologically flawed. They're not fundamentally distorted in their being. They're oppressed. And I think that there's not really a lot of literature today that takes that perspective, because people don't have a compassion, especially black academics. They don't demonstrate a compassion when they speak about young black men and boys. They don't see the potential of young black boys. When we talk about black men, they say make them feminists. And my question is why? Black men and women have exactly the same values about gender. So why are we trying to say that we need a political ideology to correct black men, as if black men are fundamentally the problem, right? The problem isn't that black men hate black women. We have some of that in our communities, but black women hate black men. We have the same studies that show that black men believe that black women are working against them, or the same studies that show that black women believe that black men are irresponsible, lazy, and dogs. So we have problems or stereotypes that have been interiorized by black folk that come from our larger environment. Black people don't wake up and say that we hate each other. We live in a world that tells us that we should hate each other, that tells us we should despise our blackness, that we should hate our history, that we should look in the mirror and want to be white. That's the function of white supremacy. So when we internalize white supremacy, or the ideas of our own inferiority, that manifests itself in the ways that we have stereotypes about each other. But that is not the natural condition of black people. Right? So in order for us to understand what has been put inside us, how we've been socialized to believe about each other, we have to take a step back and actually do study. And this is why I'm constantly saying we need black study, not these kind of identity politics or morality. So when I talk about the ideas, as I do in Chapter 4, about black men being shot by cops, I don't just give you raw numbers. I don't say that this is mistaken identity. What I say is that given what we know about slavery and what we know about Jim Crow, the murder of black men serves an erotic function for white people. It's something they desire. They desire to see the corpses of dead black men the same way they wanted to see them during slavery. This satisfies and excites the kind of culture that white people have built. It legitimizes the violence because it supports the social order. And given what we see today with Trump, we could also see the same thing with Islam. That in order for us to claim that we're a safe and secure nation, we demonize another, and that other happens to be a religion this time. Historically, that other has been black men. They've been scapegoated for every possible crime, offense, or kind of atrocity that one could imagine inside the borders of the United States. So we have to kind of reorient ourselves around what we actually see that violence and trauma to be. We have to ask ourselves, for example, why are black men who are stopped and frisked, or black men who are shot, also having their genitalia, mutilated, having their having their testes stumped, right? Being penetrated with guns and batons, and why are these types of violences happening? If this is simply an issue of mistaken identity or fear of one's life, there's a kind of erotics and desire that's invested with that. And ultimately, I conclude that black men have a perspective about the world that's just really too real for bourgeois academics to accept, that things simply have not changed, that there's a pessimism, or what I call an anti-ethics involved with how black men see things, that you keep saying that we live in a democratic society, but black men says that notion of democracy keeps putting us at the very bottom. You say that we live in a world of civility, but we see nothing but atrocity. You say that you respect life, but our lives are constantly defined and circumscribed by the threat of death. Right? So I say that experience that black men have is what generates the ideas of radical potential. The idea that we should resist the state that imposes upon us rather than trying to reform it or participate in it. It's not an accident that black men are isolated from society. And I think that they're isolated from society not just because of the function of racism, but because society actually understands that black men are dangerous. Historically, they've always played the function of rupturing the systems that have kept humanity oppressed. They ruptured slavery. They ruptured Jim Crow. They destabilized the government during the Civil Rights Movement. There's a very powerful sentiment and consciousness that black men have demonstrated historically that people simply are uncomfortable with because now it's about social mobility and rising within structures. So I don't think it's an accident that you have black intellectuals, the black intelligentsia, the black middle class taking on the same ideas of young black boys as super predators and dangerous that you see liberal whites and white conservatives doing as well. Mm-hmm. So what I'm trying to do is reformulate the very basis that we use or have to understand what black men and boys are going through in this society.
Now, are you? Obviously, I know you're not doing this alone, but is there a group or a connection through universities that are assisting you with some of this research? And could you just speak real quick? I know DC wants to get in. Could you just speak real quick? I tease DC a lot about HBCUs, and I was telling him, I said it's fascinating that we have, so many, black colleges that what you're doing, I wouldn't say should be normal because I understand the system that we're living in, but it's why wouldn't we be seeing that more historically speaking? Maybe the last 100 years or so, you have black universities, you have black educators, but you're still not getting, are you getting any assistance from that environment at all?
Well, I've spoken at HBCUs, and I've always found them to be pretty receptive of the message. Mm-hmm. Except that one time at Howard, they weren't happy.
But I've heard from people that even going to other universities, they learn more about Africana Studies or African history or Black history from other universities. They do from those. It's almost as if those universities aren't necessarily producing Black consciousness.
Well, I think it's a certain type of Black consciousness, right? Like HBCUs have traditionally been more conservative in their approach to civil rights because they've traditionally been charged with putting out the best of the best, so to speak. Black people who, can operate in white systems that are representative and have strong self-esteem so they can endure, the assaults of white supremacy. And I think that's a very important function, right? I think that because we need those people. However, you're not the type of radicality, right, that you see in, some of the people that are doing Afro-pessimism or like the kind of work that I do. Doesn't find a natural home at HBCUs because it's really reacting to the environments that you find in predominantly white colleges and universities, right? It's responding to a kind of literature that's responding Black people's problems.
You said something very interesting, DC. I'm a key said I apologize, but
No, go ahead, man.
Dr. Curry, you said something.
Yes, sir.
That I was listening to something you were saying about the part. Being, radicalizing Black people possibly through universities, not necessarily saying through universities, but through universities versus, you got to help me out a little bit, I think, versus us doing things to assimilate into whiteness more. Or I hate to say it that way, but just being more
representative,
Yeah. And I noticed that you had kind of hammered that in where the radicalization part, we're not necessarily seeing, I believe in your position, we're not necessarily seeing that part. Should that exist? I know that was more of a question that you had in place. Well, should you see Black radicalization happening? Should Blacks be set up a certain way when they're coming through these systems versus having Black people be more prepared to deal with white folks in a different type of way, in a way that's more comfortable for them?
Well, look, I think that when you talk about the university and different types of Black academics, you're going to always have different styles of engaging white people. My style, most people would probably say, is pretty antagonistic because I simply don't believe that, I just fundamentally don't believe that white people are superior to Black people. And I think that when we pretend, even in the university as students or professors, that white people share an equal stake in the kind of work we do, that is immensely misleading. Right, that when white people study race, they're studying it largely to absolve themselves right? They're studying because they're not fundamentally affected by race. They just felt bad about their whiteness. They feel bad about their privilege. Or maybe they, married a black person or slept with a black person. They're like, oh my God, this isn't fair. Or they got a black baby or something, right? That becomes a different investment. But when you're talking about the actual realities of living with black people, of loving black women, of having black children, of living in black communities, you have a vastly different stake in understanding the basis by which black people are fundamentally oppressed. And that difference is reflected in how you actually approach the problems of racism and white supremacy. Now, HBCUs are good in the sense that they affirm blackness, right? They tell black people that it's okay to be black, that you can be in an environment full of black people and these people will respect you, et cetera, right? That's very important. However, the traditional mission of black HBCUs has often been to reproduce a black middle class, right? So you don't get the same kind of antagonism, right, towards these systems, right? Whereas you would if you get people that's in predominantly white institutions and they're fighting against white people all day, right? It's just a different mode of engagement. But in terms of scholarship, it's very important because if you want to be rewarded within this system, then you have to make white people feel good, right? The scholars who are overwhelmingly supported by white liberals don't actually attack white supremacy. They say white supremacy is bad, we should feel bad about it, but they're not attacking like benefactors who are giving them jobs at, top institutions, Ivy League, semi-Ivies, et cetera. The kind of work that people do or the kind of work that indicts the system and indicts the goodwill of white people are predominantly at large state institutions, a Texas A&M, a UT, a Florida, those types of places, right? Those are not the conversations that you're having at Ivy League institutions. In reality, they're probably not the conversation that you're having at a lot of HBCUs. So it's a vastly different perspective, right? It's a fundamentally different kind of work.
Okay, DC, I got about two more questions. I promise I'll let you jump in. Well, a couple of things. Do you think that, I wonder sometimes when you're trying to develop something within this environment, obviously it's going to be attacked, but as black people move into the so-called middle class or the black middle class, they tend not to have the information that they need, I think. Do you believe that HBCUs is giving black people that kind of, or any university for that matter, giving black people the information that they need to function correctly within the environment? Or if they had information based off how you position things, would they have a different experience? They can still function in it, but just a different vision or a different experience on this realty. And the reason why I'm asking,
I think it would be the latter.
Okay, because I interact with people who obviously PhDs, master degrees, been to college, make X, Y, and Z, live in certain neighborhoods, either black or non-black, but just talking, this is anecdotal, of course, but talking to them, it doesn't seem they have a real, not every one of them obviously, but many people don't have a real reality, a black reality. They tend to make things appear that this is just how things are. Color isn't really there, even though I know it's there. But we're really not going to talk about it in any particular context. We just know that this is how we survive. Is it more of a survival thing than anything? Us just trying to survive?
Yeah, I think I think for a lot of people that's a large part of it.
Okay.
Yeah, well, for a lot of people, I think that's a part of it, right? People are coping with. Think about it. How do people who have lived their whole lives on the idea that if they work hard enough, they'll make it, deal with the reality that no matter how hard you work, you're never going to be the same as a white person. And, of course, there's individual cases where there's a truth, but overwhelmingly, educated black people in this country still experience a kind of discrimination that disadvantages their accumulation of wealth, right? Even if you make a high income, you don't necessarily accumulate wealth. So that's a real problem. And I don't think that you were talking about the perspective. You see, when we teach people about racism, and this is a large problem, I constantly tell my classes this, when you teach people about racism, you have to ask yourself, what are you teaching them for? So if you're teaching people about racism because you want people to identify privilege, then you're vastly missing the mark. When you teach about racism, you're talking about violence. You're talking about a stratification of society in which black people and brown folks are positioned outside of the core of that society, which is going to be middle class and upper class white people. You're going to talk about the ways in which black people, even when they're educated, are positioned against the interests of poor whites. And poor whites, because they outnumber them, will often override the interests of educated and middle-class blacks. You see, to teach about racism is to teach about the ways that structures influence and reproduce ideological positionalities. How white people, even when it doesn't benefit them, as in the case of poor whites, will vote for somebody like Trump, because the idea of an ethno-nationalist environment is much better for them than the idea of a black person trying to bring about economic equality. You see, that's the power of racism. It's not about antipathies or aversions based on skin color. That's a part of it. That's a product of it. It's a consequence of it. But racism is fundamentally about the way that you organize a society to get it to reproduce certain kinds of inequities along the lines of economics and race that ultimately benefit a white majority ruling class. Now, that picture becomes extremely complex. See, that picture is where you have to know more than hashtags of the idea of intersectionality, because you actually have to understand the ways in which certain ideas, like Trump making the argument that Mexicans are bad hombres or that Mexican men are rapists, isn't racism. It's gender politics, right? It's the ways in which you're constructing white men as saviors of white women's sexuality, because white women fear the idea of a rapist that is black or brown more than they ever would a white man who rapes them, because it's more consistent. You see, that's the power of how one constructs nations and builds up ideological legitimacy for projects that are fundamentally racist, imperialistic, and xenophobic. But those aren't the conversations that we're having in our everyday classes. That's not how black people speak about racism in this society. Black people largely speak about racism based on how they feel people discriminate against them.
Should we always do race, gender, and class together?
No.
Okay.
Because I don't think we really understand what those terms mean.
Okay.
And for example, when we say this, and this has been one of my biggest criticisms of intersectionality, or at least the way that people have applied intersectionality, right? When you say race, class, and gender, what exactly are you talking about? Right? Okay. So does that mean if I look at a situation where a black man has been convicted of beating his wife, and I say, okay, well, it's a situation of race, so these people perhaps may internalize white supremacy, or they're oppressed. But it's a case of gender, because men want power over women, so they abuse women for it. But, in terms of class, well, I don't really know what to make of that. I guess poor people, because he's a poor black man, he's beating her because he wants to be a rich white man, right? Is that my analysis?
I had watched you ask some of your students that question. It was surprising to see them struggling as you was and they was trying to figure out those three terms. So that's why I wanted to ask you that. I had two more things for you, and I'm gonna let DC jump in. If you can just touch on, I think the word you used was hegemonic, and the black male, and then looking at feminism, masculinity from a Western perspective. So I guess white feminism, is possibly the same as white masculinity from a Western perspective.
Well, if you're looking at it ethnologically, yeah. So, that's a big topic.
I know it's a big topic. If you could just, give us just a little, just a quick
that's a big part of my research. So, here's so in 19th century America, ethnology was the dominant science of how you studied race. So today we say, we do critical race theory or race theory. If you did that 100 years ago, you would say, I do ethnology. In the system of ethnology, races were gender. So there was no independent gender that belonged to bodies, right? So if you had gender, you were a white patriarchal race, because that race had evolved such that there were sex distinctions between men and women. So men had masculinity, women had femininity. If you were not of a white patriarchal race, you were of a feminine savage race. And these races did not have genders, because there were no distinctions between the men and the women. So the argument that I was making when I talk about feminism as patriarchy or feminism as white masculinity is to say that feminism exists as a debate about the sex roles of white women within a patriarchal race. But for feminism to exist, it has to be patriarchal, because that's the only way you could have a female sex role in the first place. And when you look at the history of what white feminists have done, they have fought more so to be companions to white men rather than overthrowers of white men. In other words, when feminists were arguing for suffrage and equal rights, their argument was they can rule other races just as well as white men could. And that's the problem. I was actually looking at an article that Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote on the 16th Amendment. And she said, do you want to be ruled by savages with their inferior ways of womanhood? Wouldn't you much rather be ruled by white women who are much more superior than the Chinese, the African, etc.? So the ways that white women or white feminists conceptualize equal rights or their suffrage rights was not about equality for all. It was about the right to rule other people, as white men do. And that's a vastly different history and articulation of women's rights and white feminism in the 19th century and early 20th century than you get with the liberal feminist movement. In the 1900s, or in the 20th century, so when you get into the 1900s, you see the same kind of thing. White women overwhelmingly support the white man's burden. They've taken up the white woman's burden, which is basically soft power. They brought Christianity and stability to the newfound colonies, and they endorse the project of white supremacy. So you ask yourself, how is it that white women who were being celebrated by the KKK in 1920 for getting the right to vote, because now they could absolutely crush the Negroes' right to the ballot, right, because there's more white people voting, how these very same people who are being celebrated by the KKK somehow become the greatest victims of patriarchy 30, 40 years later. You see, this is the problem I have with the way that liberal notions of progress have been just taken up as a cultural background for many black people. We've simply assumed, because we've been taught the narrative, that America is about ever-expanding freedom. We left slavery, we overcame Jim Crow, we got rights during the Civil Rights Movement, we got Obama, so our freedoms are constantly expanding. But we don't look at the ways in which they're constantly being retracted. We don't know about the historical battles between black liberation and white feminism that doesn't just originate in the Civil Rights Movement, but that has a vastly long history in which white women were trying to deprive and emasculate black men to show that they were fundamentally undeserving of the ballot. The reaction to black men getting the right to vote wasn't white women saying we want equality with black men. It was saying this is wrong because we're fundamentally racially and more civilized and superior than black men. And that's a history of white feminism that people simply don't want to articulate. You saw the same thing happening when they came out with sex role theories in the 1970s. These white women were making fundamental arguments about their superiority to racialized groups of people, not that they actually desire to be next to other groups of people. I mean, think about it. When has there ever been a language where white women said, I want to be equal to a black man? That doesn't exist, because the historical positionality that black men have had next to white women has been the rape. White women have told white men, in order for us to move into the public, in order for us to move into society, you have to kill off black men. You have to protect us from Mexican men. You have to, right? The idea of white patriarchy has been that the white woman's purity in body and reproductive powers have to be preserved and uncorrupted by racialized males. So it becomes ironic that we want to fast forward into this idea of feminism, where we somehow believe that black men who were owned by white women, who were constantly lynched because of accusations from white women, who were being imprisoned because they looked at white women for longer than 30 seconds, can somehow, in fact, have more power than that group. That somehow black men have been more powerful than white women. Right? These narratives don't make sense when you just sit back and think of them, but nonetheless, they rule the day. So the point that I try to make in terms of white feminism specifically is that we have to do a very careful understanding of history to understand the actual relationship between black people who were deemed savages during enslavement and Jim Crow, and who claim that they've been somehow discriminated against on the same level as black people. The latter claim that they've been oppressed the same as black people is just fundamentally not true.
All right. Man, I appreciate that explanation. I'm gonna let DC jump in. I definitely, if we're able to get you back on in the future, I definitely want you to touch on Black life and Black death. I know you had mentioned something about how we define ourselves through Black death. So I just thought that was fascinating. But anyway, DC, are you still there?
Yes, sir. I'm here. Can I be heard?
Yeah, I didn't mean to take up so much time.
No, hey, I'm learning. Hey, it's just it's just a treat to just sit here and just soak it all in, you know.
Right, I got about 30 pages of notes. I'm like, I want to, you know. Anyway, I won't go.
I'm pretty sure Dr. Curry wouldn't mind coming back. Am I right about that?
Absolutely not.
Good.
I would love to.
hopefully, we can, get you back on the program and we can kind of delve in a little bit longer. So, in fact, you are our first guest. So, hey, that is breaking ground for us right there. So,
thank you. I appreciate the honor.
No problem, sir. No problem. So, I really want to get into this, and I know that our co-host, we have T and Paradox, and they don't really like to delve into this, but I think it's appropriate because I know that you focus on this, and I want to kind of focus on the gender dynamic between Black males and Black females.
Absolutely.
I think that you already touched a little bit on it, but I think there has been a pattern, and I'm going to get to my question. I just want to kind of give you an idea where I'm coming from.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I think there's a pattern of thought that has developed where Black women feel that they have to be acknowledged through the history, so to speak, but it doesn't really reflect what really took place, given to the context that you have given us. And when there are discussions, like panels, I see, and I don't see you on too many panels, and I think there's a reason for that. I think everybody got the memo on Dr. Curry. He comes with receipts. And I think what ends up happening is everybody, just like you say, the Twitter warriors, the feminist ideology lens that they have allowed us to popularize that we see on MSNBC, CNN. So even when you have Black males up there speaking about Black male death, it's still in the context of a female gaze, so to speak, where we don't get to the real kind of concept of what's really damaging or what's really happening to the Black male out here, and how racism has pretty much formatted under that bridge and attacked us. So my question, just to kind of get you, and you could just kind of launch off, is how do, just in general, give a language that is still encompassing, the Black females' struggle, but also given the real context of what has basically taken place to the Black male body. So let me give you an example. Black Lives Matter. I know you have issues with Black Lives Matter, and I think I fall in the same line as you, because I think what ended up happening was they used Black male death for careers or to launching pads of an ideology, when that wasn't really what the focus was to try to end Black male death. And I just kind of want you to kind of go off on that and see if there's a way that we can kind of bridge the gap, because we're all about trying to put us together instead of separate. So if you can kind of speak to that in larger detail.
Look, I think there's a few nuances. One, I think Black women do have, if we're talking about concepts of erasure from history, I have two little girls. I think it is extremely important for us to recover the role that Black women have played, throughout civil rights, slavery, et cetera, right? Because that's our people, right? It's important for us to have Black women researching Black women, their stories, their positions, their experience, et cetera. I have absolutely no problem with that. I support it wholeheartedly. I think the problem comes in when you have very narrow identity politics being utilized to suggest that some stories should be heard while others should not be. In other words, that we've heard enough about Black men, we shouldn't study or hear about them anymore. So we're going to decide that at every panel, at every conference, at every conversation about death, it's Black women. And I can tell you from personal experience, given that I work on Black men, that's exactly the dynamic that's predominant in the academy. It's so bad that, and I've actually had conversations with people about this. I said, listen, I'm confused. Black women outnumber Black men in the academy, but you tell Black men that they can't talk about themselves as being the most underrepresented, even though that's a material fact. Now, that's not to say that Black women can't talk about their discrimination and oppression and marginalization in the academy, but why is there investment in denying Black males from being able to speak about their experience from their own positionality? And what I've discovered over lots of conversations and name-calling and et cetera is that these things are ways to motivate people's careers, that the academy, just like society, actively discriminates against Black males because they're undesirable bodies. that when black men are in job pools, black men are discredited simply because they don't like the way the person speaks, they don't like the way the person looks, or some white woman in a hiring committee will say that she feels threatened or the person doesn't have a nice attitude. This is the way that black men are being constructed even in universities. So when we're talking about how black men and black women can actually have conversations that cross that border, then the conversation has to be about like actual facts. It has to be that, listen, just because black women have one experience, that's not the totality of gender experience, right? That just because somebody says that they're a feminist, that doesn't stop the conversation. The way we exist in a world today where it's like if someone says I'm a feminist or I feel silenced, the conversation should end and focus on that person's experience or feelings. That's not how you actually grow a conversation or a history or a dialogue about different positions. Black men and women are not going to agree on everything, right? My wife and I don't agree on everything. We agree on a lot of things, but there are some things because I experience the world as a black man and she experiences the world as a black woman that we just don't see eye to eye at. Now, that doesn't mean that one's more condemnable than the other. Today we exist in a world where identity politics says if you don't believe what a black woman believes, then somehow your position is wrong, even if the facts or the ideas that the black woman holds are just fundamentally false. And we have to move beyond that kind of silliness. Right? The gender wars that we see today are largely based on people making their careers. They've thrown black men under the bus. They have asserted that black men have power and privilege when black men's population in the university is simply not increased, much less overall in society in terms of middle class and white collar jobs. People assert that black men are fundamentally dangerous, that the largest killers are black women, this ridiculous statistic that Jamelia Lemieux and Amber Phillips said not too long ago, that black men are the number 2 killers, are the number 1 killers of black women. This kind of silliness only perpetuates the investment that white systems of criminality have in the university. Because what we're doing is we're creating a black middle class that's extremely comfortable with pathologizing black men because most black men exist still in lower classes, right? We've taught black people that their bourgeois liberal politics includes the condemnation of black males, and that's not a strategy for liberation. It's anti-black misandry. It's social mobility, but it's not a strategy for black liberation. And then when we hear about domestic violence or we hear about issues of rape in our communities, we just deposit all of that blame and all that criminality on black men, right? I think this is one of the reasons that Stacey's Patton book is so important, about sparing the child, is that it really does show that black women have a role to play in the socialization of violence and trauma in young black boys' lives. That's not to say that we should completely blame black women, but it's to say that they have a part next to white supremacy, systemic abuse and oppression, poverty. But we have to start looking at the roles that are happening in our community. Right now, the gender war says, there's a communal problem, it's a straight black man's fault, right? They construct black men in ways that are just caricaturized. So straight black men evidently are the most evil beings that exist in the black community. They hate women, they hate homosexuals, they hate themselves, they're prone to rape, they're prone to abuse, they're prone to violence, right? I mean, think about this. These are the same racist stereotypes that white people have about black men. The only reason that we accept them is because we recodify them as if they're somehow gender norms. That, we're not really racist, we're just talking about gender. But the concept you have of gender hypermasculizes black men and makes them fundamentally deviants in the communities and families that they exist in. So it's not accurate because we can test any of these ideas or our attitudes of black men and find the exact opposite. But 2, it's like, what is the personal investment of the person that claims that they're a black scholar that only looks at the effect or the consequence of black male actions? In other words, if you're so interested in the dynamics of intimate partner violence in the black community, if you're truly concerned about black women, then why have you not asked the question, why do black men and black women beat each other? Why are the rates of domestic violence disproportionate? And the answer inevitably coming from most feminist positions are going to be hypermasculinity. They do it to gain power. But when we actually look at the literature, we're dealing with actual problems like unemployment, previous histories of abuse, depression, right? Anxiety, neuroses, mental health, right? These are real problems that people deal with that can't be explained away simply because you decided to read Bell Hooks for the first time.
So Yeah, Dr. Curry, I'm sorry to interrupt. We have a break coming up, but I wanted to know
Okay.
how are we on time? Are you able to hang around for a little bit longer?
Yeah, I have about 10, 15 minutes.
Okay, so on the way back, just so you could think about it during the break, I wanted to kind of go over, I know you're probably familiar with Charlemagne the God and how problematic he is, and also the recent characterization of Stevie Stevens and what that means in as far as black males and the actual identity politics of how that is coming across in the system. So this is the Codebreakers, and we'll be back as soon as possible to kind of go over some of these other discussions points. Thank you.
No, I'm not a writer.
Okay.
Black Talk Radio since 2008, providing new black media for the masses.
Welcome back. This is the Codebreakers. We have Dr. Tommy Curry on the line, an esteemed philosopher at Texas A&M, and we're discussing gender politics, the problem of racism in the community. So, just continue on the same vein, but I wanted to kind of like tie in, the new Charlemagne book. I think it's called Black Privilege, if I'm not mistaken. And I don't know how you feel about that. And also he has come out and said that he's trying to change the minds of black people and, trying to give more of a positive enlightenment on, how he grew up and basically how that can actually change some of the actual, I guess, some of the stereotypes that are basically put on upon black males and black females alike, and then also the black deaths of I forgot the older gentleman's name, and Stevie Stevens or whatever the gentleman's name that killed the older gentleman. How that black male death is still basically characterized as being something that is falling into the whole ideology of black males being the problem and our death being normalized out here. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, look, when Charlemagne had, Phillips and Lemieux on, and he really didn't have an answer for the ridiculousness of the statistics that they just spewed out. I just completely lost respect for him as a host. And I understand that it's not a academic talk show, but the base responsibility, if you're going to be a journalist or radio personality for black people, is to be able to know very basic facts about black people, right? And I think that what ends up happening a lot of times in the conversations I've heard Charlemagne speak about is that he's just vastly uninformed about a lot of things. And I think that while he certainly has the personality that draws people in and that people are listening to, that there has to be a very serious process of re-education if the message is going to be black empowerment. And I haven't read his book yet, so I have to kind of reserve my opinion on what his actual message is. But just in what I've seen, that you can't read everything through your personal life, right? You certainly can. You should certainly say that given what I've experienced in life, I think that this would be helpful for certain groups of people. But I think it's extremely dangerous to have a view of life which is saying in a time that black people are experiencing economic turmoil, that they're being attacked by the rollback of civil rights under the Trump administration, that this is really about black people thinking differently. There are things in the world. There are actual policies. There's laws. There's guns. There's bullets. There's police forces. There's actual oppression. There's the fundamental belief that black people should not be existing on an equal playing field or in the same spaces as white people in the 21st century. That reality has to be dealt with first and foremost. And if you're going to detract from that reality, if you're going to kind of deflect from it by positive thinking or kind of pull yourself up by the bootstraps kind of ideology, then I don't think that that's a positive message. Not only for the fact that it's not politically expedient, but it's just manifestly false, right? We have to start dealing with the fact that there's a disproportionate amount of power that white people hold in this country, and that disproportionate amount of power has lost its liberal tenor, which means that white people no longer feel that they have to show compassion or listen to or capitulate to the interests of black people. The idea of a white person that is now morally affected by the fact that you're oppressed and you want them to be an ally is coming very quickly to a close. In that world, what does of racial politics or racial consciousness look like? And that's a question that I don't think people like Charlamagne the God are trying to actually answer.
All right, Dr. Curry. We have one call. I'm not sure if it's for you or not. If you have time to take this one call,
Absolutely.
Let me see if they want to have a question for you. Strategic Melanin, I think that's who you are. Did you have you can hit star. Did you have a question for Dr. Curry?
I think you're unmuted. You can speak.
So maybe they're just listening in.
Yeah. Usually, Strategic Melanin is just listening. They're a regular listener to a lot of the programs. I do have a question, if I may ask.
Yes.
Oh, definitely.
All right. My name is Scotty, sir. Great stuff I've been hearing from you tonight, and like Paradox said, I've heard you on other programs as well. My question, you were speaking earlier about white feminism being central to white supremacy, and as you were speaking about the 20th century, the first thing that came into my head, because I live in the South, I live here in North Carolina, and plus I read a lot. History has always been one of my favorite subjects. But when you were speaking on that, the first thing that came to my mind was a group called the Daughters of the Confederacy. These, I'm very familiar with it, yes. Yeah, these groups started around the turn of the century in the 1920s and are largely responsible for a lot of the white supremacist statutes we see. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that, if you had looked at that as part of your analysis of them.
Well, see, this is what's interesting. I mean, the idea of womanhood in the 19th century and early 20th century was pretty much synonymous to mother and community. You have women, giving grand speeches. I mean, even black women in the Atlanta Sociological Laboratory talking about how women make the laws of society. So it was not a situation where women didn't feel themselves actually contributing to and growing society and in many ways dictating social organization. The Daughters of the Confederacy were largely responsible they were auxiliaries, sometimes often working through churches, to get monies to create monuments of the fallen soldiers, right? So they were responsible, I call them, for the Lost Cause memorials. And the Lost Cause memorials that you find throughout the South, there's one actually in my city in Lake Charles, is honoring the soldiers of the fallen cause, which was the Civil War, that tried to preserve the agrarian economy and legacy of slavery in the United States. So the view was that it was a lost cause, but it was a righteous cause that should be respected and remembered, which is why you have these statues and monuments all through the South, on various college campuses, etc. What's amazing about that is that it really does show the ways that white women have sought to inculcate and perpetuate the ideas and memories of white supremacy. I think one of the biggest flaws that we have in this country, and especially as theorists, is that we somehow take a post-civil rights view of how we view discrimination. So during the civil rights movement, because white women were defined as minorities, what we've done is we've automatically said that they are minorities. We've taken a view of Title VII in the Civil Rights Act to suggest that these are the minorities that the world has given us, where acts of genocide, imperialism, and empire somehow just don't matter anymore. They're not something that we focus on. It's not where we teach or draw our attention to when we talk about racism. So I think the Daughters of the Confederacy, very much like WKKK chapters that sprung up all around the country during the first, second decades of the 1900s, very much are in line with the kind of pro-white supremacist agenda that we in many ways see being supported today under the reign of Trump. These are white women who voted for Trump. These are white women who support his policies. These are white women who believe in the vision of a white republic. So we cannot be mistaken in the idea that white women have historically and continue to be solidly committed to the project of white superiority in this country.
All right. Well, we really do appreciate everything that you have, all the knowledge you have given us today, a lot of research, a lot of books for us to go out and read. Did you have any recommendations before we end the call or in this topic with you discussion?
Well, yeah, I mean, I would definitely say buy my book.
Of course.
The Man, Not Race, Class, Genre, and the Dilemmas of Black Manhood. I think if you're really interested in the history of white women and white supremacy, Louise Newman's book, The Origins of White Women's Rights, is a fantastic read. It's something that we read in my graduate courses. Mm-hmm. I would also suggest, if you're looking for a great book just on race and racism, the works of a good colleague of mine, Joe Fagan, Systemic Racism. A dear colleague of mine, William A. Smith's work on racial battle fatigue. He also works on Black Men and Boys. It's just fantastic work. So I think any of those kinds of readings, if you're interested in some of the things that we've discussed today, would just be top notch.
All right, wonderful. Well, we definitely appreciate your time. We definitely, just thank you for the courage. I know that you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
We definitely appreciate you. Really putting yourself out there and really pushing. I think you're really pushing to really challenge us, to have us think about things in a certain way, and even giving guidance. I'm not sure if you know that, obviously, but for us out here, you're definitely giving us some direction and helping create a lot of clarity. Just want to say that.
I appreciate that.
You can obviously find Dr. Tommy Curry on Twitter at DRTJC. You can also find them on tamu.academia.edu/Tommy Curry. A lot of his works obviously are loaded there. And one thing you did say that was interesting before I let you go is that you had said basic facts about Black people. I find that, it's a simple statement, but that's very, very interesting, and also re-education. So I definitely appreciate the information you provided.
Thank you. I mean, it doesn't take much for us to understand that Black communities and Black people have had vastly different histories and sociologies than white people. And if you can't respect Black people enough to just find out what that is, then your ability to speak about Black people should be seriously challenged.
Wow.
Absolutely.
So if hopefully we can get you back on in the next few months. I know your book is up July 1st is coming out, because I definitely want to talk to you about globalization, the continent of Africa before slavery, and just getting some understanding of that. And also just how our relationship is with whiteness, just from miscegenation. So us having, slave masters and other people that had fathered many of us, and then that's been passed down. And then African people, obviously before slavery. Just want to get your thoughts around that. Definitely when we have another discussion for sure. Well, we do appreciate you. You can have a good night. Definitely.
Well, thank you for the invitation, gentlemen.
No problem. Thanks a lot, Dr. Curry. We appreciate you, sir.
Appreciate it. Definitely.
All righty.
All right. Take it easy.
I will. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
All right, DC.
Man, that was wow. That was a lot. I'm still processing, like some of the different things that he was discussing. And I think that,
not smart enough.
Yeah. It's like,
I got to take notes.
Just being in class, going back to school. But I think it's very, very important that we don't forget our own history. And I think that what has happened and sort of what he was reiterating is that some of this stuff is easily found out, or you can kind of go through the different text and historical record to see that some of the ideals or the ideas that we are holding may not be something that is actually true anymore, or we're just misinformed about what we may be believing. So just for anybody that's listening to the program that may have different ideas about what was spoken about earlier, and especially about the functionality of what black male death is and how it's been basically factored into being used against us, in a concept of how identity politics is basically taken forth and be put front and center in front of the actual black family. And also I think that black male heterosexuality is almost like a bad word now. I mean, it's like you can't even have a conversation because people are going to say that you're privileged, you're this, you're that, and there's no basis, no history of that. So, we take the position that we're all victims. We are all under the same system. We're reacting differently to the system, by the way, but please do not forget that the black males, that is your gender mirror, is also experiencing racism at a very, very high level, and some of the actions that you see out here as a result of that. So no, I think that he gave a perfect illustration of how to give a little bit more context to some of that that is going on out here.
Yeah, it's a lot of information to process. Definitely got to do my research. He forces the reading is more important than television.
Well, it is. That is definitely way more important.
And as a philosopher, I think you're set up. Well, as far as the way he approached things, is really to challenge everything in a sense. Scrutinize everything. So. I definitely appreciate him putting that work in. Did you want to transition over to some other topics, or I would like to say this before, and I know you probably had more questions to ask. I probably took up both of the.
No, I got my questions out. No, it was good because some of the same, we have basically the same kind of questions, so. It all fit into the same kind of context. So.
Yeah, man, I probably set up maybe.
I did want to talk to him. Wow, that's a lot. I did want to go ahead and get his thoughts on the current events as far as like is it Stevie Stevens or whatever the gentleman's name?
Yeah,
and kind of get his thoughts on that, because I think that what has happened, even though I don't think did he kill a woman at all? He killed an older black gentleman, correct? An older black male.
Right.
Yeah, and then there was some problems with that, and I think he blamed his mother of something of that matter, that he basically blamed his mother for, I guess not showing him enough attention. And, people have ran with that like they know exactly the reason why he snapped. And, I guess he broke up with his ex-fiance or girlfriend. There's so many different, I have read so many different stories.
When it's a black person on television being narrated by this media, I don't have anything to say, to be honest.
But it's not just the white media. I'm just saying just black people blogging or writing about
everything.
Him.
Right.
And they, what ends up happening is we don't have enough facts to piece together, a fair narrative. Not fair. I'm using the word fair. Here we go. A just narrative. So what we do, we fill in the spaces, and then we color it with our own biases about what we believe the problem was with this particular man. And I just think that he just snapped. Of course, the system has the biggest, causability when it comes down to this. But, he just broke. I don't know what triggered him or whatever the case may be, but he spoke himself about what his issues were, and that's it. I mean, I can't formulate anything outside of that. I didn't know the man directly, so I would just warn against anybody formulating any ideas about victims of racism, especially when they do things that are like of this nature.
Well, the immediate response,
the
immediate response that I saw was that a black man shot an old black man, so he should be killed. That's pretty much what I got. Who cares about the facts, information, what he went through, his life, him being black, etc. You had a younger black male murdering a older black male on Facebook Live, and just that incident, not to get philosophical about it or get academic about it, just that incident is enough to say, kill yourself, you got to die, don't care what happens to you, don't care if the white law enforcement or the system kills you. You kill the older black male, it's cut and dry and kind of left right there, right? Do whatever you want to do to him, don't care. So I think, I don't know, many people may have taken that position or not, I don't know, but the people that I was around, the few, that's the position that they took on that.
There are so many think pieces
not
about
to the causality of it, but just that.
No, there are think pieces about Stevie Stevens. It ties back to the whole black feminist discussion, how black males are dangerous and problematic, and we're fragile at the onset of different things and under the pressure of the system of racism, white supremacy, which is all true. We're powerless. So this causes us to react and do things impulsively, and that this is painted all of black males the same way, which is pretty much SOP, standard operation procedure. But just the fact that there's no voice, there's no way of basically speaking to that truth and acknowledging it, but then basically speaking and then trying to vet it out amongst your fellow victims just seems to be problematic, because there's no room, it seemed like, for us anymore, as far as black males. And he really reiterated that. And I think that it's becoming a situation where we're becoming so divided now that now it seems like, and you can correct me if you don't think this, but now it seems like there are like two separate discussions, two separate types of energies almost, or fields that are being basically put out there into the mainstream, as far as like, this is what black women want, and this is what black males are on, or this is what nobody care about what we want. So it's not even about that. It's just this is about what the black male story is.
I think it's complicated, and something that we can definitely bring up the next time we talk to Dr. Curry. But I think it's complicated. I think anecdotally, I don't know. It's challenging. I'm around 600, 700, 800 black people, male and female, mostly female, and being around them day in and day out, and interacting with my own family. Even though we struggle with whiteness, we struggle with this environment. It honestly still seems like a lot of things about some, things that you hear in I guess in universities, or these people who debate or whatever, doesn't necessarily translate. Like, you know what I'm saying? So I may deal with females and males, and we interact and discuss things. And the people that black, I'm talking to somebody, a black guy about females, and he loves black women. Like, it's not even a question. It's just automatic in a sense. Absolutely. Like, you know what I'm saying? On the surface, we know there are some complexities to that. Clearly, a lot of complexities to that, because we're talking about body type, mindset, intelligence, the way they see the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, what they're all about, what they're trying to get into, what they're trying to do at any particular time, how old they are, how many kids they got or no kids, et cetera. It's a long laundry list of things that you talk about or interact with or be attracted to. So, as an individual, very complicated as an individual, very complicated when you look at the data versus your individual life and how you interact with people, obviously. So, and that definitely segues into what I want to mention as well, is that I was talking to a friend of mine today, and they had mentioned that, we had discussed some things that they're going to a funeral tomorrow of a young black boy that was robbed by other black boys on Easter Sunday. Tried to rob him and ended up killing him, and he literally fell into his grandmother's house. Very unfortunate. Didn't have any money on him, but he had his dress clothes on or whatever, and right. He was robbed. And they were going to a funeral, I think tomorrow. I mean, this weekend, I believe. But anyway, they also had an incident as well. Same person, where a friend of theirs, female, was dropping off their child to a relative, and in the process of dropping the child, this particular female has lost their son. Their son was murdered in an incident, but was taking her grandson and giving him to their relative. And in this interaction, some black male jumped into the car and tried to take the car. And it was a very basic vehicle, nothing extravagant. And she grabbed him. The guy tried to kill her. Literally shot 3 times, and the gun didn't go off. As she was taking her grandson out of the car, and it was interesting just listening to it and just thinking about just things that are really happening day. This just happened last week. Things that are happening day in and day out, and 3 clicks and the gun didn't go off, and the guy took the car. She was able to get the kid out. The guy took the car, ended up crashing the car. Shot at the fire chief, etc. Not to get too much into the details of it, but anyway, it was just interesting just listening to very unfortunate, horrible situation, obviously. But just that you have a black female telling me this story, and how is, and this is not an older woman, but slightly older than us, but it's been dealing with that through her whole life. Always going to funerals, always dealing with interacting with black men, black boys, and in a predominantly 99% black environment, and just how it shapes her mind, how it what perspectives does it give her, how does she process that information. So anyway, you just had me think about that, not the just based on what we were just talking about, but
yeah, I think it's very important because this problem doesn't get solved with us being separate. It's no way. So as long as we have different narratives going on,
you just made me think about something. That was one of the interesting things, is that there were 2. It was interesting that they noticed that there were a couple of black males on the corner watching the event take place and didn't do anything. And I was just trying to dig in just a little bit on that, and I was thinking, and as I was asking questions, it was like, well, and I was telling her, I said, you have all these black males in the area. A lot of them are strapped, but you're not getting any protection. And just thinking about that, that's all. Just thinking about where you see a black female, older lady, grandchild, taking the child out. You're watching the guy get in the car, watching the guy pull the pistol out, watching the guy aim it, click it a few times. It just happened not to go off. And take the car and drive past you. And there's no sense of, and I'm not going to obviously, harp on that too much, but there's just no sense of, when you're feeling the pain is what I'm saying. So when I'm telling you this, while I'm telling you this story, it's the pain happened. All of this stuff I'm telling you just happened in the last week. So just the pain of, I don't understand, black men, black, boys should be, is my protection. They should be protecting me. These events are happening, and black women and black girls are not being protected. Black boys aren't being protected. So you have these black men, supposedly, in the environment, while other black men are taking advantage of vulnerabilities, right? You see an opportunity, you're trying to take advantage of it. And the black male, doped out or not, is thinking, I can get away with this because of how the environment is structured. It's a impoverished environment. Things are the way they are. They naturally have developed. So I can literally, while black men are in houses looking at this, while there's black men on a corner watching this, and I can create this event and there's no repercussions. But who's the savior? The fire chief, the person from the fire, the white male from the fire department, and the police officers that show up.
Mm-hmm.
And I noted that and I'm just looking in this person's eyes. I mean, very upset, in tears, crying, upset, or whatever. Just feeling the pain of it, but almost tears, but almost sort of almost used to it as well.
But think about this though. This. I want you to stay there because this is an older woman that most likely has a connection to males in her family. Now, going through this experience and seeing this firsthand or seeing this over an amount of time repeatedly and the ineptitude, think about how that affects her interactions with even if it's like a husband, a lover, a brother, an uncle. It all colors it. You see what I'm saying? The disrespect, the lack of empathy that has developed for black male bodies. And the reason why I think that we're seeing this is that what has been lost is the reason why we're here now. See, because now we're so much into the symptoms that we can't even see what the root cause of this anymore. Like, we can't even pattern it to our grandparents anymore. All we saying, well, this is how it used to be. But how it used to be is how we got here. So it can't be that how we used to be was anything that's better than what we're at now. Because if those were our grandparents, there is a direct line on how we got here. You see what I'm saying? Like, that is never really kind of fleshed out when we deal with this in a real sense, because there's no separation. These boys have mothers, these boys have aunties, these boys have grandmothers, not unless they're part of the, the orphanage system. But most of these people we know of, they probably staying at grandmother's house or some other family member's house. And they're dealing in their own family dynamics, whether it's, good or bad, negative or positive. It could be a little bit of both. And that has a direct effect. Everything has an effect on each other. And when you're dealing in the system of neglect and in a system of being attacked on a regular basis, and this fleshes out within communities of people that are classified as black, because you're just basically reacting at this point. And a lot of times it doesn't really even have anything to do with resources. It's just about respect. I just don't like this person. This person stays up the block from me. I don't like them. I don't like nothing about them, this and that other. I mean, we want to make it all about economics, but a lot of it doesn't really have anything to do with economics a lot of the times. A lot of it has to do with other things that are just social. Like a hatred, like a embedded anger that can't get quelled. You know what I mean? Like there's something basically so basic as far as the anger that people feel that they don't even know where it's coming from, so they react all the time. It can be economics too. I mean, you said that this young black male, they was trying to rob him and he didn't have anything, and then it, initiated the murder. So
what my point is that's what I find fascinating is that you have black males and black females, sticking up people, etc. But you obviously have a few of them who would jump out there and really hit folks that got money. that generally ain't black people in most cases, obviously. But for the most part, I know proximity plays a role in this, but when you really think about it, I'm only speaking of the pain part. It's just painful when, I put it this way: when you live in small towns, you typically know everybody, and not saying that can't get out of control and people get robbed. I'm not saying that. But when you jump into a city environment where even though block to block is like family, it's still a lot of strangers. Still a lot of events that are happening that are beyond understanding unless you've been in a city. Like, you're not going to really grasp the concept if you've been in the burbs, or if you've been in small towns or rural areas. Really, just random people show up. People are popping up all over the place. Obviously, they're not that random. You can always obviously figure out where they're coming from, but you understand what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So to live in an environment like the city, where you are more cautious, it is perceived to be more dangerous. You have these stories that come out, but when it's more of a personal situation where I'm interacting, and same as you, obviously, but we're interacting with people that, from a social perspective and from an economic perspective, are at the bottom. And we're also interacting with people that are Black Americans, descendants of slave Black people, and also African people and Caribbean people who are what we would define as somewhat successful. Not 100 millionaires, but they may have a few $1 million in the bank. Not many people, but a few $1 million in the bank, or they're making $200,000-$300,000 a year, right?
Yeah,
retirement,
not a million.
Except, right?
Yeah, not a million. Yeah, they make it probably like 150,000, 200,000. Yeah, I got you.
But my point is that if you make a couple $100,000 for 15, 20 years plus retirement, where they're paying you 60, 70, 80% of your income, you're going to be in the millions of dollars, obviously. But anyway, neither here nor there at this point. I'm just making just trying to get to a point that you're interacting with a vast array of African people, of Black people, right?
Different experiences.
Where you have Black wealth coming over here from Nigeria that's moving into the DC region that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not millions of dollars. And so you're interacting with those people, you're seeing those people, but then you're also seeing the local people, I would say, not the imports, but the local people who either work themselves to a particular level, or are impoverished, struggling, which is the majority of the people, struggling, suffering, etc., and dealing with environments where, people are getting killed all the time. Mm-hmm. It just strikes me, and this particular person that I was talking to, and some other people that they're friends with, every few weeks, every month or two, they're going to a funeral. And, to be that close to it, it just strikes me. I'll put it that way. More because I'm more sensitive to it than I was in the past. Mm-hmm. More so probably now than ever, that how do you talk to a person like that? How do you try to explain to someone like that, that, you're in a system, you're in an environment that produces the behavior. Mm-hmm. You're in an environment where this is obviously, we know is normalized, but as I oppress you economically, as I oppress you socially, as I oppress you educationally, as I create and develop and mature and
pathology gets developed, right, man. A pattern behavior gets developed,
right?
With this.
And so we can almost predict Black death. We can predict it at this point, right? We can kind of work that out year over year. But when you're talking to an individual person, that information don't mean anything to them.
It don't matter.
So I'm always dealing with trying to console someone, right? You're trying to console a person where their friend's grandchild was murdered,
right?
Where their friend was really would have been murdered. I mean, it honestly may have been, when you survive death, you get spiritual in a lot of cases. You're trying to figure out, well, the gun went off. The gun was clicked 3 times, had a clip in it, was clicked 3 times, didn't go off. The guy pulls off, gets pulled over, and shoots. So the next pull, which is the fourth shot, shoots out. The round goes off. So you get spiritual, obviously. But anyway, just trying to speak to a person is just trying to process that. So say if you're trying to speak to someone, trying to be, I guess, so-called aware of conscience and trying to explain to them that, this is because of this. Or matter of fact, even more interesting, that you're talking to the person who's committing the events, trying to explain to them why their behavior is their behavior. It tends to be a challenge as well.
Yeah, see that's what I mean by us developing two different ideals of what racism is, or even when we use terms like racism or oppression or I'm oppressed, now it has been fractured into identity. So now we have communities that have developed over time that have basically been fractionized. So now you have people kind of conflating things where they would say there's been, because there are black males dying most of the time, they would say stuff like, well, there's been 2 trans people. And now we don't know what transpired or what happened or the reason why they passed on. But we know that these are black people that are just passed violently to death. And there's been an issue. There's been an issue with that going on in certain communities, and that is not being looked at. And my thought is that, yeah, that generally is not looked at, because most of the time those people that are basically trying to pass as or are now accepted as women are black males or born black males. But see, that's what I'm saying. Now the language is getting shaky. So now we're defining things. See, like they'll call me and you cisgender, which means that we are heterosexual males. So cisgender is basically coming across as having a certain amount of understanding. Now, this is more in the academic realm. And then you have something that's a little bit more, closer to us, where we're dealing with someone that is in the battlefield, so to speak. And then they're dealing with their whole dynamic as far as like with the black male experience. And, how they're looking at older black males that are not taking hold of the community, and the reason for that, and the reason why, there's this kind of unabashed or no response to the younger black males that are out in the community doing a lot of the violence that's out there. And, black women see this and they be like, they have a response to it. And it's basically, it's understandable. And I think that's what's happening to us, that we are mentally breaking. We're fracturing now, and we're going into these separate categories. And now you have people having different ideas of what this is supposed to be. And of course, those solutions are going to be totally separate from each other, because we're not a unit anymore. So now you don't even have a community. You have a situation where you got people living in the same space, in the same home even, and they had different ideas about how to move forward with a solution. And that is the problem. And that's why it's hard to console. Because how can you console when there's not a general respect there for you? You're not respected. You're not strong. So what ends up happening is, where were you at the end of the day? Why were you not there to protect with weapons or furious violence? Because that is what's needed. That's what's needed, because we know what this is all about. This country's always been about violence. And see, that's always been my thing. Like, people act like there is no consequences to trying to get people to do a certain thing. Yeah, you can go out and talk to people and be like, hey, you need to do this and this and this. But if someone has an ability to enforce harm on you and to intimidate you by violence, then that's what's going to be done. So that is where we're at. So how do we get past that point when it comes down to people basically reacting to the system and how it is. That is the conundrum, that we find ourselves in now.
Yeah, I mean, we know that we obviously at the highest level going to be tied to, to the Western Empire, the American Empire, white supremacy, etc. I mean, we know that that's where. I mean, what you're asking for, I think sometimes, to try to solve, and I know I guess we're gonna have to do the next program on what we're going to talk about in the second hour, but I think that the issue that we have is that because you're in the system, and that's something I noticed that even with Dr. Curry, when he's debating or in conversation, you can almost hear the challenges of it because you're trying to do things while you're still being oppressed. Mm-hmm. So we know that we need money, right? We know that we need the system to do things for us. And what I mean by that is we clearly understand that in this environment, well, to my knowledge anyway, is that you have to rely on the system. So if I get robbed, I have to call the police officer. Mm-hmm. I don't call the nation. I don't call other people to try to help me. I end up calling, not necessarily me per se, but in the incident I was just telling you about, we end up calling the police. So I mean, it's such a contradiction when this, like I think it was the I forgot what event it was where in Baltimore the brother was having some issues and some psychological issues, and the mother had no choice but to call the cops. They killed him, but he was having mental issues, and he needed medical help, but they killed him.
Yeah,
and I mean that's a pretty common thing when it comes to black male bodies, but it makes you wonder because when me and you're speaking, we're black men, we're black males, we're dealing with it. Mm-hmm. It's strange sometimes to even hear someone speak on it as if this is like 2630. It's been 900 years later, or 2,000 years later, or 5,000 years later, and we're having this conversation about 2017 America. And we're just discussing, but we're living it, we're breathing it. We're having to get in our vehicles every day and interact with it. We're going to areas dangerous that's been set up and that are very dangerous and puts us in a very vulnerable position and makes us question, other black men, other black males, how do I interact with this environment? Because I know that you're hungry. And if you're hungry, you're going to do what you got to do to survive.
You got to feed, man. You got to feed.
You got to feed. And so what that's going to typically entail is that you're going to harm me. Now, as I know you had mentioned, these certain people who talk about things and whatever, they're not going to stop and say, I'm not necessarily going to blame the person who did it. I'm going to try to get an understanding of the environment that created the behavior pattern for that event to take place. Right. So I know that depending on where I'm at, anywhere on the planet, really, if you're starving people out and you set up a system, that's what you produce. That's the behavior you produce. That's what I was mentioning, even with our going into the program. I think one of the topics we were going to do in the second hour, outside of black people's oppression to profit and benefit, which we can touch more on in the next program, but ghettoizing the planet and white domination. So when you look at how the European has set up this planet through colonization, even though many nations have independence now, regardless of all of that, the way they set up there in these environments, specifically capitalism, but even socialism and communism creates ghettos, creates extreme impoverished environments.
There you go. And with that, and what we're saying, everybody, is that when you do that, when you create poverty or an extreme condition for a group of people that are going to be determined or kept at a certain point, when those people have children, those lives go on, and then those children have children. So what you see in Chicago, right? If we hypothetically just think of it like that, you're seeing JJ's kids, Thelma's kids, but they're from the projects. See what I'm saying? And they had both parents there. You remember, I was just like I was telling you, like people forget, people act like Chicago is just like what it is now without having a so-called history, a pathology that developed, a situation where kids saw their parents struggling. They came from the rural South. They kept the same customs, kept the same beliefs, wanted to keep the family intact. But when they saw the dad was working, at the steel mill or at the factory and they were paying him crumbs, those children was like, bump that. I'm not doing that. And if they didn't go to college and they didn't make it in academics, then what is left for them? That is what we're dealing with. You see what I'm saying? Like these things have an actual pattern. So even though it wasn't at that height at that particular time, this is what ends up happening. And then you have more of a fallout. You have more of a population, which you would call, you just use the word ghettoized, where basically a pathology gets developed. Right. So now there is a pattern of behavior that's being developed in this community or this certain type of neighborhood, which is becoming normalized. And now these kids have kids. And that's where we're at. That's why you see things develop the way that they do. So these things leads up to that point. And then you're still going to have your people that fall in and out of, whatever the success bubble is, but it's always been held in check. Black success is always held in check by white supremacy. It doesn't lift all boats. So, we don't go with Jordan. We see Jordan, but we don't go with him. We see Oprah, but we don't go with them. They're just, at the end of the day, very, very highly well-paid employees. They can't feed the community of Chicago. Both of them stay in Chicago, right? So there's two Black popular billionaires that's from Chicago or been in Chicago for a long time. The president, he's from Chicago. Michelle Obama, the first lady, she is a born and raised Chicagoan. I mean, just, you see what I'm saying? But Chicago is so-called the epicenter of Black pathology, of Black self-neglect. Now, how does that make sense in the larger scheme of things? You see what I'm saying? Like it is a very unique kind of brew and situation that has taken place here in HQ, because the things that has happened to Black males in particular, because you have to destroy that, because that is where the protection is, and then you leave Black women overall vulnerable. You see what I'm saying? To everything. So at the end of the day, they're vulnerable to being exploited, vulnerable to being sexually abused by other Black males that are not in check, and by other white males that have financial gain over them. So that is the reason why there's this animosity between us. So now Black males that fall in and out of that group, we can't even discuss the system with, our gender mirror, because there's no respect for us. So how can we solve this problem when there's no respect for Black males in general? None.
You gotta, how does the saying go? You gotta get respect? No, you gotta earn respect to get respect. How does it go? How did that saying go? I forget. But
respect is earned, not given.
Well, that's what I mean. That's what I think. That's what I find fascinating about people like Dr. Curry and others, obviously Dr. Welsing, etc.
Oh, they give Dr. Curry the blues.
Yeah. But just that he has information like other people that can kind of make it make sense on a large scale. Because individually, like I've been to Chicago. I got family from Chicago that live in Chicago, live in Detroit, live in Decatur, live in Grand Rapids, live in Flint, live all over the place, West Chicago, etc. And in those different locations, I don't really have an issue. There's no real issues. I know there's some things that are going on, but it's more business related, not to make light of murder. A lot of it's business related, etc. But and again, capitalism produces a lot of this behavior in different groups, depending on how things are structured, and we're getting the brunt of it. it's a struggle just because, like I was saying, anecdotally, you look at a lot of different families, people appear to be okay. Even though you have some violence, it seems that people who write about things or blog or discuss things, they have a mindset that everything is so horrific. And I'm never really clear on that part of it. Where you go into certain neighborhoods, you go into certain areas, and you see the love, you see the relationships, you even see to some degree protection. And I have tons of stories, of course, but there's events where you do get some protection, but at the same time, because of how the laws are structured, you're limited. And as they continue, and it's weird because on one hand you hear things like guns, drugs, etc. in rural areas and in cities. The system floods that stuff into those systems, and then the humans in those environments, respond. And I wish that there was a way to make it make sense in a, like scientifically, because like for me in my mind, it's natural. You know what I'm saying? Like the way things are structured, you're a kid, you watch the movies, right? Just to give an example of real time, right? You're a kid, you watch the movies. And you, for whatever reason, everybody's different. You may lean towards certain violent type of films that's romanticized. Then you walk outside your house, and as a kid, you want to have fun, you want to do what you do. Now, this is not every kid, but a percentage of us. We want to go out and have fun. And within that environment, there's older people who've been through the system. They've been to high school. If either they finished or they didn't finish, right? They're in their 20s, they're in their 30s, they're hustling in various ways, and there's an attraction to that. And this is an old story. We've been hearing this for years. I'm not saying anything new, obviously. There's an attraction to it, and because if you went to church, the way that taught you, and if and the way the education system taught you, it seems like those things, it's unusual, and I can't make it make sense, to be honest with you. How I can go to school, I can go to church, I can be in the outskirts of the city, or I can be in a rural area, and somehow be captured by hustling, be captured, in a sense that I wanna carry a pistol. I feel like I'm not being protected, and that I need a pistol. I need to ride with certain types of people. I need to have a certain edge to me. Not only does it attract certain types of females, and it's fun, it gives you a certain type of energy. Even getting locked up gives you a certain type of cachet, a certain type of energy. So the way it's been developed is just it's so much to try to understand.
Well, just in closing, this is a brutal system. We thank Dr. Curry for coming on and sharing his thoughts, and please check out some of his works. He is one of the intellectual stalwarts out here that is really trying to delve into solving this problem of racism, white supremacy, and give it some kind of contextual background. So hopefully, if we even have any female listeners that are listening to this program, please, feel the concern and the word I guess the word that I'm looking for is basically trying to connect, because we're not trying to play the oppression Olympics here. We just want to have honest conversation and honest dialogue about trying to solve the problem and break this code of this gender war that is going on, that is between black women and black males, that is basically fracturing our community. Like, I have come to the conclusion, and I could be incorrect, but I don't think, and this is just for a very logical reason, that we can move forward when most of our particular stances are completely separate. We have a completely different viewpoint that is separate from each other now. Like, it is completely separate, and it's detrimental. Our children are feeding off that. It is all over the internet. That is feeding it. And people are making careers out of this. That's what makes it so detrimental, that people are feeding themselves off this confusion. So just pay attention to what you listen to and what people write, and just really do the contextual thing and really try to get more information about what you're hearing out there. Like, does that really make sense? And then ask yourself, is this really benefiting the plight of black people? Because I could tell you right up front, there's no such thing as black male privilege. There's no such thing as black woman privilege. It don't exist. Not in the system of racism, white supremacy. And that is a statement, and either the system exists or it doesn't. But if the system of racism, white supremacy exists, then there cannot be any black privilege. I'm sorry, Charlemagne the God. You are a victim of racism. You are employed by white people at the end of the day. So you adhere to their particular rules. They can shut you down and stop paying you at any moment's notice, and then they can shut your mic off. You don't have to be on TV. You don't have to be on the internet. And that's for any of us. We are subject in their system at this particular point, until we solve the problem of racism. So those are my final thoughts. Be empathetic towards black people. Try not to name call. Like I said, I'm at the top of that list. I fall short all the time. And, keep up the good work, and, keep up the good work and learn from basically dealing with black people. And,
all right. Well,
this is the Codebreakers.
This is the Codebreakers. Black love, black family. This is Paradox.
This is D.
Until next time.
Peace.